Good evening. It was very early in its life that people began to see Garry's Mod's potential for comedy and animation. Early webcomic series made with GMod, such as Concerned, grew popular on places like the now-defunct Facepunch forums. And though it was a far cry from a conventional animation program, people still enjoyed finding ways to express themselves or tell their stories through Garry's Mod, whether it was something serious or just a goofy sketch. Something a lot of people failed to take note of when talking about GMod's rise to popularity is that the game was initially published in 2006, the same year that YouTube was purchased by Google and began to skyrocket into the mainstream. This is why there's such a ripe collection of goofy GMod videos from the late 2000s. The platform and game both grew to popularity at the same time, and it wasn't long before people put two and two together to realize that YouTube was a great spot to put their GMod projects. The GMod parody, by Jehoshaphat from 2007, is a perfect example of the quintessential early Garry's Mod machinima. A random, nonsensical collection of skits consisting of whatever the creator thought might be funny. Sometimes their own gags, sometimes reimagined scenes from other shows or movies, but almost always featuring characters with overly contorted faces, slapstick comedy courtesy of Source's built-in physics engine, copyrighted music since YouTube was in its infancy and lacked Content ID, and just generally a load of chaotic nonsense that people couldn't take their eyes off of, Baby Richter being one of them. In 2008, one of the most popular GMod comedy sketch shows hit the internet. Building on the format set by the GMod parody and other videos like it, YouTuber Das Bullshit created his series The GMod Idiot Box. It was one of the first GMod series to build a real cult following, and it proved to have a lot of staying power. Skipping through the series, you can see a lot of changes. Bullshit's skills as an animator improve. His graphic settings improve as he gets a more powerful computer. The video quality jumps from 480p to 720p and then later 1080p. You even witness the evolution of GM Construct, all while the jokes and video games featured get more and more up to date. I mean, for God's sake, the first episode of this series features the What is Love meme, and the last episode features Five Nights at Freddy's. I digress. The GMod Idiot Box finally fell idle with the release of episode 15, which is the latest and most likely last installment we'll ever see. It was released in 2015, which was simultaneously one of the best and one of the worst years Garry's Mod has ever faced. See, this is the year that Garry's Mod started absolutely exploding in popularity. It became a mainstream title with loads of big-name YouTubers exploring its custom game modes or wacky mods or whatever. While this was great for the growth of the player base, it was also a breaking point for a lot of loyal fans. By this point, it had been 3 years since Garry's Mod 13 came out, and while it might be hard to imagine now since we've been stuck with it for so long, there were a lot of people who didn't like this update for various reasons. For starters, mods. With the game being moved to a newer version of the Source engine, a lot of shit got broken. Weapons, tools, vehicles, everything. There were a lot of complaints about this that Garry kinda just blew off, saying that staying with GMod 12 wouldn't be an option, and if you wanted to keep your mods, you'd just have to remake them. Basically told modders to cry about it. A lot of people felt that, for a game with mod in the title, Garry really wasn't doing enough to help the game's modding community, and it put a bad taste in their mouth. I kinda get it. There was also a bit of backlash to Steam Workshop integration, as it all but disintegrated communities built on modding sites like Garry'sMod.org and FPS Banana. Personally, I think it was a worthy sacrifice for the convenience of one-click mod installation, but I can respect the opinion. Ultimately, a lot of people didn't like the direction Garry was taking his mod. They considered it too commercial and accessible for what had, up until that point, been a somewhat niche community for people who enjoyed Valve games. It was no longer a Half-Life 2 mod. It was now its own product, detached enough from its roots, that a lot of kids knew it as the goofy game with Five Nights at Freddy's, Slenderman, and MLG Teletubbies, with no idea what the fuck Half-Life even was. It was also 2015 that people were finally starting to get used to Source Filmmaker, which is an actual competent animation software for the Source engine. Well, at least compared to GMod. The amount of people who jumped ship left the GMod animation scene a shell of its former self. And this was made even more painful by a real-life tragedy that struck the internet around the same time. It was on January 25th, 2015 that the GMod community learned that the hilarious and ludicrously talented GMod animator Kideo706 had passed away from leukemia at the young age of only 20. Quite frankly, the GMod animation scene as we know it died with him. The previously mentioned final episode of the GMod Idiot Box was posted just a couple months after his passing, with Das Bullshit effectively retiring from YouTube not long after. And it was around this time a lot of the remaining Garry's Mod animators like EthioMod took their leave as well. And while there's still some people going at it, the scene is just not what it used to be. But what's old is new again. In the last few years, there's been a big rise of interest in internet horror, and with that has come the rise of what has often been dubbed as Garry's Mod ARGs. Eventually, a couple of bright minds had the idea to mix these old classic GMod machinimas we've been talking about with some darker concepts. What if the ragdolls the player toys with in these videos were real human souls, trapped in the game and reduced to nothing but playthings for a godlike being? If that sounds interesting to you, I recommend you check out my videos covering Gunslinger Pro 2009 and Badwater Videos 2009. That's all I've got for now, though. Thanks for having me.